Different racing games ask you to do different things. Some ask you to just be fast, some ask you to be perfect, some even ask you to crash, but then you have Project Gotham Racing 3, which is a game that asks a slightly different question. Can you win and still look good whilst doing it? Okay, so welcome back to the Game Inspector, a series where we take deep dives into some truly fantastic games. Or maybe some bad ones, yeah, I don't know. But today we are looking at... It's upside down. Project Gotham Racing 3. Now, this is not my original copy of PGR3, sadly. I have no idea what happened to it. I've moved around so much. So this lovely bundle copy, not for resale, I purchased from CEX for about £1. Now, this is a game that I do have a personal history with, but I don't really remember it, to be honest. My dad bought the Xbox 360 on launch, and this was one of the games that came with it. I remember playing it. I don't really have any strong feelings towards that memory. I don't really remember what it was like. So I've done a full playthrough of it for this video, and oh my god, what an experience it's been. We'll get into that in a moment. So anyway, welcome to the Game Inspector. I'm sticking with that as the series name. I know I asked for some suggestions, but I've decided I quite like it. So without further ado, let's jump into the world of Gotham Racing and, well, its history. Released in 2005 as one of the flagship launch titles for the Xbox 360, PGR3 arrived at a very specific moment in gaming history. Now, of course, this game was built as a sequel, but it was also a showcase or a statement piece for the next generation of Microsoft's console. This was a game that was designed to tell players what next generation racing was going to look like. So it was developed by Bizarre Creations and published by Microsoft Game Studios. The game had a lot riding on it. The original Xbox had already built a strong reputation for racing games, and the Project Gotham Racing series was one of the platform's signature names. Obviously, it wasn't as clinical as Gran Turismo or as chaotic as Burnout, and it wasn't as underground and culture-driven as Need for Speed. It was just kind of sat somewhere in the middle, stylish, technical, fast, and honestly, I think it was a bit smug. But that was the appeal, because Project Gotham Racing wasn't just about crossing the finish line first, it was about how you got there. Every drift, clean racing line, daring overtake and near miss, the game noticed and rewarded you for it, and that was the heart of the kudos system. And in Project Gotham Racing 3, that idea came back with more confidence, more spectacle, and more expensive machinery than ever before. This was a racing game where you weren't starting out in something slow and working your way up from nothing. No, this isn't like Forza Motorsport where they might throw you in a Chevrolet Spark to begin with. Project Gotham Racing 3 opened the garage doors and immediately surrounded you with cool cars. For your first selection of cars, you can choose from a Noble M400, a Honda NSX, a Lotus Esprit, an Ultima GTR, and even a Nissan Skyline. And obviously, I went with the Skyline because, well, yeah. Anyway, the point is, from the get-go, you get lots of cool cars, and if you are after a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or even a TVR, it doesn't take long before you can get your hands on those as well. So yeah, the game has cool cars, and on this console that really mattered, because back in 2005, visuals were part of the selling point in a way that's kinda hard to fully recreate now. This was the big jump to HD, the era of reflective paint, detailed cockpits, shiny city streets, motion blur, if you're into that, and screenshots that looked almost unreal compared to what we'd been used to up until that point. Project Gotham Racing 3 understood that pretty damn well. It was trying to be a racing game that you showed to someone when they asked why the new console was going to matter. You could load into London at night, blast through New York, tear down the Vegas Strip, and suddenly the 360 actually felt like a real generational leap. The cities were bigger, they were brighter, the cars were more detailed, the interiors were modelled. But what makes Project Gotham Racing 3 interesting today is that it wasn't only impressive because it looked new. It had a very specific identity. This was not a pure simulator, it wasn't trying to punish you for every mistake or bury you in tuning menus. But it also wasn't just a simple arcade racer where you could bounce off every wall and still feel like a racing hero. It demanded control, not total realism no, but still, control. You had to understand each car, manage the slide, hit the corner properly, and carry speed without throwing the whole thing into a barrier. And when you did that well, the game rewarded you with kudos. Not just as a score, but as a kind of approval. It was the game essentially saying, yes, well done, that looked good. That's what made the game feel different. It turned racing into performance. Winning mattered, obviously, but winning badly was never really the full point. The real satisfaction came from threading your car through a city street with confidence, building a combo and holding a drift just long enough and crossing the line, knowing that you won the race with style. So yeah, this is an episode of the Game Inspector, so we do have to ask some questions. This is a series that eventually faded away, so what happened to it? And more importantly, does this game still hold up today? Is it really that good? So now I realise this intro has been like 6 minutes long, we need to actually get into it. So before we go into the game itself, we need to go back to where this style-first racing philosophy really began. Back before Gotham, before the 360 or even Xbox. Back to a little Dreamcast racing game called Metropolis Street Racer. So yeah, before Project Gotham Racing came out, Bizarre Creations had already had this kudos system idea with a game called Metropolis Street Racer. It released on the Sega Dreamcast in the year 2000, the same year that I released, developed of course by the guys at Bizarre Creations and this time published by Sega. And in many ways it contains the DNA of what Project Gotham Racing would become, except I would argue it's a lot harder. But it had real-world cities, technical street circuits, licensed cars, a strong sense of atmosphere, and most importantly of course, the kudos system. This was the feature that changed everything for that game. In most racing games, your goal is simple: finish first, set a fast lap, beat a timer, whatever. But Metropolis Street Racer added a second layer on top of that. It didn't really care if you were quick or not, it cared how you drove. Clean lines, controlled slides, overtakes, precision, risk, confidence. Now don't get me wrong, the system was a lot harsher in this game than it is in Project Gotham Racing. You would lose a lot for the most minor of contact, and half the time it wasn't even caused by you, but it's a solid starting foundation. The name Metropolis Street Racer sounds like it should be about illegal racing, neon lights, and arcade chaos, but the actual experience was just so much more controlled than that. This wasn't a game where you could just throw the car into every wall and come out looking good. You kinda had to have patience to learn it, and the skill to get through it. It demanded that you understood not just where the road was going, but how to carry yourself through it. And it does make it very rewarding, but oh my goodness guys, this is such a hard game. It has a reputation for being demanding, and sometimes very brutally so. The kudos system wasn't just a bonus score ticking away in the corner, it was completely tied to your progression in the game. If you wanted to unlock more of the game, you had to engage with it properly. You had to drive well, drive cleanly, and drive stylishly. And I can imagine for some players, even myself, that was frustrating. But for others, it's what made the game special. But there was one major problem with Metropolis Street Racer. Well, the Dreamcast was in trouble. By the time the game arrived, Sega's console was fighting a very steep uphill battle. The game was ambitious, stylish, and full of ideas, but it landed on a platform that was nearing the end of its life. Albeit a bit prematurely, but it was. So while it earned a devoted following, it never really became the kind of mainstream racing phenomenon it might have been on a more successful machine. But thankfully, Microsoft noticed, and when the original Xbox launched in 2001, Bizarre Creations got the chance to bring that philosophy to a new platform. If you want to learn more about Metropolis Street Racer, I've actually done a full video on it already, so I'll link that in the description below. Anyway, the result of Microsoft noticing this was Project Gotham Racing, and even though the name changed, the foundation, if you played it, was very obvious. This was, in spirit, the successor to Metropolis Street Racer. The same studio, the same obsession with real cities, and stylish driving, and the same basic idea that speed wasn't everything. But now it was attached to Xbox. The original Project Gotham Racing launched alongside Microsoft's first console, and it played an important role in shaping Xbox's early identity. Obviously, Halo was the headline act, we all know that, That was the game that turned Xbox into a serious contender overnight. But Project Gotham Racing mattered as well, because it gave the Xbox a racing game with personality. Not just a technical demo or a box-ticking launch title, a proper, distinctive racer. It had New York, London, Tokyo, San Francisco, it had fast cars and sharp presentation, and it had that central hook, the kudos system, now rebranded and refined for a new audience, and that hook was still brilliant. The game constantly pushed you to improve not just your results, but your driving character. Anyone could throw themselves toward the finish line, but could you hold the slide or clip the apex? Could you keep the combo alive without smashing into a barrier or missing cones? That was the difference. That's where PGR found its identity. It occupied a space between arcade racing and simulation that very few games managed to hit. In fact, when I think about it, the only other games that have managed to hit that are in this series. It wasn't as punishing or technical as a full sim, but it wasn't mindless either. You couldn't just switch your brain off. The cars had weight and mistakes mattered, but at the same time it still had pace and energy and that immediate console racer appeal. And more importantly, if you're an executive for Microsoft, it sold pretty damn well as well. The first Project Gotham Racing became one of the original Xbox's early success stories, helping prove that the system could support more than shooters and PC-style experiences. Xbox could have racing games too. And then came Project Gotham Racing 2 in 2003, and this is where the series really started to mature. If the first PGR was the Xbox launch foundation, PGR 2 was the refinement. Bigger, deeper, more confident. The car list expanded, the cities expanded, the event variety grew, the overall structure became more polished, and the series' personality became clearer than ever. This was no longer just the Xbox racing game with kudos, this was now one of the defining racers on the platform. Project Gotham Racing 2 took players across locations like Edinburgh, Barcelona, Hong Kong, Washington, Chicago, Florence, so many places, and of course, the Nürburgring. That location list alone tells you how much the scope had grown. The series wasn't just revisiting the same city fantasy, it was becoming a global street racing tour, and that suited the kudos system perfectly. Each city had its own rhythm, some streets were tight and technical, some were wider and faster, some encouraged some clean racing lines, and others tempted you into some really fun slides and risky overtakes. The game understood that location wasn't just scenery, it was almost a character in the game. Their cities weren't open worlds, but they had that character. They felt designed around the act of stylish driving. Every corner, every straight, every braking zone was an opportunity to build a combo, lose a combo, or make a decision that separated a good lap from a great one, or a shit one. And then of course you had Xbox Live, and that was a huge part of it. By 2003, online console gaming was starting to become a big, old part of Xbox's identity, and PGR2 fit into that very nicely. Racing against the AI was fun, don't get me wrong, but racing against real players, chasing rankings, uploading scores, comparing performance, well that added a whole new layer to the experience. The kudos system suddenly had this social edge. It wasn't just about impressing the game anymore, it was about proving yourself over other players. And that's an important step toward PGR 3, because by the time the 360 arrived, online features weren't just a bonus, they were kind of expected and part of the console's identity. Leaderboards, profiles, DLC, connected competition, these were all becoming a part of what players expected from a modern Xbox game, and PGR 2 really helped lay that groundwork. It also had one of the strangest and most important side details in the entire series. Geometry Wars. Hidden away as an arcade cabinet inside the garage, Geometry Wars started life as a bonus minigame, just a small extra, something playful tucked inside a racing game for some reason. But it would later become one of the breakout stars of Xbox Live Arcade, and that little detail says something about Bizarre Creations. They had confidence and willingness to put personality into places where other devs probably wouldn't bother. And that personality is part of why these games are still remembered so fondly. Were they polished? Yes. Were they technically impressive? Yes. But they also had taste in a specific mood. They weren't generic, they were authored and designed by a studio that understood the emotional appeal of cars and cities. By the end of Project Gotham Racing 2, the series had a clear identity, and that identity is the key to understanding the game we're discussing today, PGR 3. PGR 3 wasn't trying to reinvent the series from scratch because it didn't need to. The foundation was already there, so when the Xbox 360 arrived, Bizarre Creations kinda had a different challenge. Not, what is this series, because they already knew that one. The question was, how do you take a racing game built on style, speed, cities, and performance and make it feel next generation? That's where Project Gotham Racing 3 comes in. Because in my opinion, this is the moment the series went from stylish to spectacular. Hello, it's me again, I am still here, and I just want to start off by saying that this is not a sponsored segment, okay? This is just something that I wanted to try and shoehorn into one of my videos, and I think this is the most relatable moment I can get it in. So this, right here, is a book called The Development of Racing Games, 70 Stories of Successes and Failures. A little while ago, someone watching my videos commented and talking about a book that they've been working on, and it goes into the history of all these different racing games with developer interviews and all sorts of cool stuff, ranging from Project Gotham Racing, Test Drive, Need for Speed, Midnight Club, but it also goes into failures like Flat Out 3 as well. Now, I have not read the full thing, but the sample is absolutely phenomenal, and I would highly recommend you guys check that out, so I'm going to put a link to it in the description below. Really impressive work. I think it's quite a niche but very interesting subject to get so far into these development histories of video games. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. It's a cool book about racing games. It's right down my street, so I thought maybe it might be down some of your streets as well. Anyway, let's get back to some Project Gotham Racing 3. So yeah, in other words, this was a game that needed to sell the console, and that context explains so many of the decisions that Bizarre made with this game. The most obvious change was the car list that we spoke about earlier. Previous games had a broader sense of progression where you were working through different vehicle classes and starting with more modest machinery before reaching the really serious stuff. Don't get me wrong, there's still different vehicle classes here, but all the vehicles that are in those classes are mental. And that was 100% a deliberate choice. The developers had this design philosophy with the quote being, "Life begins at 170. Which kind of sums it up perfectly. It wasn't slowly building up from ordinary cars. This was throwing you straight into some very cool, very dramatic looking, visually impressive vehicles. I mean, hell, like 2 hours into the game I was able to get my hands on a Ferrari F40, primarily so I could get this aura shot like Lewis Hamilton. How did I do? I'm gonna guess probably not very well. But yeah, it made sense for a launch title, because if someone had just bought a 360, I wouldn't have wanted to just have a Nissan Micra or something. I would have wanted an F40, a Murcielago, a DB9, something fun, exciting, and kind of dangerous. So I thought I'd just talk you through some of my favourite cars that I used in this game, because oh my god, they're so much fun. The Nissan Skyline, for one thing, as I mentioned at the start of this video. Oh boy, what a car. I mean, obviously I got it because of Fast and Furious. Brian Skyline is an iconic car and I love it very much. So of course that's why I picked it up. Then we have cars like the Ferrari F40, and oh man, what an iconic vehicle. I mean, I've just spent ages trying to recreate the Hamilton meme, so you know, there's that. But it's a really good car, like a so much fun to drive car. The Aerial Atom is a car I bought too early on and honestly is really hard to control. It's kind of just like this pipe Mario Kart looking thing, but it is pretty cool. We've got the Aston Martin DBR9 that basically just looks like a safety car, but it does not feel safe to drive. But it is, again, a lot of fun. And I think those are the cars that I spent the most time with in this game. I did get others, but that's what I can think of off the top of my head. It was trying to sell this elite fantasy, Xbox 360 joke intended, and the hardware was allowing the devs to push that fantasy further than ever. The jump in visual detail from 2 to 3 is so noticeable. Car models are so much more complex, reflections are better, lighting is richer, the cities have much more atmosphere, the roads were more textured. The whole game had this premium sheen and glow to it that made it feel expensive in a way that really suited the subject matter. This is one of the reasons that I would say this game had such an impact at launch, because it looked like a new generation racing game. Everything about this game was designed to make you stop and go, oh, this is pretty damn cool, this looks different, you know, the camera angles, the car models, everything. And then you have the cockpit view. And, you know, that's not really unusual now, because in-car cameras are much more common and look good, especially now. But in 2005, having detailed interiors for every car was a serious statement. I made a similar point in my Test Drive Unlimited deep dive, because that has a very similar kind of cockpit level of detail. I'd argue maybe actually Test Drive has a slightly more detailed interior, but oh my god, does it look good in this game. Most of my gameplay is in third person because I like how good the cars look in this game, and I think it's important to show that off, but oh man, when I hopped into the first person view, it's so much fun. And sitting inside the cars, especially back when this game launched, made the experience feel much more immediate and I guess more personal. You weren't just watching the car from behind, you were looking through the windscreen and seeing the dashboard, the mirrors, which, while they weren't very high res, still worked, steering wheel and the cabin layout. It's this level of immersion that helps sell both the car you're in and the hardware you were in it on. And I think having that really good first-person view fits this series pretty well, because it's always been about style and control, and that cockpit view just makes that even more intense. And I think something else that was quite interesting was the map choices they went with in this game. Because at the time when this game came out, a lot of racing games were starting to shift more towards the open world format, but Project Gotham just kind of doubled down and went, nah, you're staying in London, son. We had London, New York, Tokyo, Las Vegas, and the Nürburgring, and aside from the Nürburgring, they were all closed street circuits. And I'm glad they stuck with that, because it makes the game much more interesting. It feels more focused and doesn't feel bloated, is what I'm trying to say. Every race in this game is about the car, the city, and the act of driving well. There's no open world map full of filler and crap you don't care about, no endless checklist of distractions, no attempt to be everything at once like a Ubisoft game, just fast cars, sharp circuits, and style. But, on the other hand, this is not a game that was stuck in the past. It was still a connected 360 game, you know, with Xbox Live starting to become a central part of Microsoft's identity. And this game leaned into that with online racing, leaderboards, DLC, and Gotham TV. That last feature is especially interesting because it shows how forward-thinking the game was about spectatorship. Gotham TV was built around the idea that online racing wasn't just something you played, it was actually something you could watch, which I think is really cool considering how old this game actually is. Players could follow races, view highlights, and engage with the online scene in a way that pointed toward a future where multiplayer games weren't only about participation, but about the audience, and that fits this game perfectly. A series built around style naturally makes sense as something to spectate. If Kudos turns driving into performance, then Gotham TV turns that performance into a broadcast. Was it as developed as modern esports style viewing? Well, no, obviously not, this was 2005, but for 2005 that idea was very much so ahead of its time. And while not every design choice in this game would be universally loved, especially the narrower focus on supercars and the loss of some of the broader progression from earlier games, it's hard to deny how confident and smooth the final product feels. Anyway, I've been yapping for like the best part of 20 minutes about this game and the background on it, so let's actually break down how it plays. So as I mentioned, this game is definitely not pure simulation. It's not trying to be. It isn't asking you to tune any suspension settings or learn tyre temperatures or treat every corner like a driving exam, but on the other hand, it's also not pure arcade chaos. It's not like Burnout, where the joy comes from aggression and destruction. It's in this middle ground, and that middle ground is where the series lives. So the cars in this game, they're fast, they're responsive and exciting, but they still demand some level of control. You can feel the weight of the cars when you throw them into a corner, which is super exciting. You feel the rear end starting to slide, and when you carry too much speed and the car starts drifting wide toward the barrier. And that creates this constant tension of the game wanting you to push, but also wanting you to be clean. And obviously it wants you to show off for kudos, but it punishes you when showing off turns into sloppiness, or you're reaching too far. So let's break down some of the events in this game that you'll actually be playing. Obviously, you've got your standard races, and they are so much fun. Don't get me wrong, the AI in this game, they're not the best. NPC drivers in the world. They're not going to provide you with the most insane challenge if you are a massive veteran of the series, but they are still fun, and racing wheel to wheel, going too wide into a corner, is very exciting. But honestly, some of the real meat in this game comes from the other events that you wouldn't really expect to come from. So you've got standard time trials, but they actually managed to take the time trial formula and split it up into a few different kinds of trials. So you've got the standard time trial where you start off the starting line and do a lap. Then there's hot laps where obviously you start before the line. And then they've got this kudos time trial thing where every time you earn kudos for drifting, taking a good line, whatever, it pauses the clock. So it's a constant countdown, but the only way you can get to the line in time is if you're driving extra stylishly. That's so cool! What a great idea! Another game mode that does have a time element to it but isn't the main thing are the cone events. Now, I'm not very good at these because I struggle to have control of the cars at the best of times, and this requires you to drive through cones and keep a combo to earn very high kudos. You can drift around, obviously, between cones, but you've got to keep the car in control because if you tap and clip a cone, your entire streak is broken. And I'm very good at tapping and hitting cones, guys. There's also drift events that require you to earn a certain amount of kudos from drifting, probably in like 10 to 20 seconds. They're very good, they're short, don't get me wrong, but they are very good. And then you've got the classic overtake mode, which has been in the series since Metropolis Street Racer, where you have to overtake so many cars within a certain time limit, and that is also very exciting. It's not like the NPCs are racing you, but if you set the target of the higher side, like 6 to 8 cars to overtake within the time limit, it can be so much fun. So you can choose what difficulty each event is on. It goes from bronze up to platinum, and depending on what you set, depends on how hard the actual overall goal is. So in terms of a race, if you go on hard, then it's going to want you to finish in second, but if you choose very hard or platinum, then it wants you to finish in first. The same logic then goes to the time trials. The higher the difficulty, the harsher the time limit, and the same for the kudos scores on the cone and drifting events. I would always aim to set the harder difficulties on races or time trials, but the cone ones I just had to set lower because I was so bad at them. But overall, it's an insanely good lineup of events that they've managed to fit into this game, and none of them really overstay their welcome. They're all balanced in a really nice way. I mean, if I had to have one minor complaint, I guess I wish there were more races, because I really enjoy the racing in this game, but there is still a lot of that there. So that's really me being very nitpicky. But that medal design is just so good. It's such a good idea because it's accessible without actually being shallow, so you can really set yourself the challenge. If you know you're not good at the game, you don't have to push it and just become increasingly more angry like I did at Metropolis Street Racer. The difficulty is what you make it, and I think that's a fantastic way to play. And what's even better is the amount of cars in the game. They all drive very differently, and you'll start learning which cars suit your driving style. The Skyline I started with was absolutely fantastic, but early on in the game I made the mistake of picking up the Aerial Atom, and oh boy, that wasn't for me. I could not control that thing to save my life. I even got some faster cars as well, like the DBR9, that was pretty fun. The F40, as I mentioned earlier, such a blast to drive. You'll pick and choose and you'll learn what cars are for you, but each one feels very distinct from another, and I think that's absolutely fantastic. I keep saying fantastic a lot, sorry guys. I suppose if I were to have one other nitpick about this game, and I mean this as a nitpick, it is nothing particularly major, but sometimes the loading times in this game can be quite long. But I mean, my Xbox 360 that you're seeing the footage of is obviously quite old. The game is old, and I'm guessing the hard drive in these things aren't particularly fast, so, you know, it's to be expected really. But sometimes if I messed up on a cone level and I wanted to restart, the loading back in would take a little bit longer than I would have liked. One other aspect of the gameplay that is a lot of fun is the split screen. I was actually able to test the split screen on this game, and it was a lot of fun. Sure, there were a few moments where the frame rate does chug. There was one level on, I believe, the New York track with the bridge where the frame rate just dropped so much, and you'll be able to see that in the video. But oh my god, just great fun. Great clean racing if you get someone who's, you know, competent at playing a racing game to play with. Really adds some longevity into the game. And the customization for that multiplayer is really good. You can choose any car, any track, set the time of day, the weather conditions, whatever you want. It's all there at your disposal. So Project Gotham Racing 3 looked the part. It had the supercars, it had the cities, it had the cockpit view, it had that launch title prestige, but how was it actually received at the time? Well, critically, the answer is pretty damn simple. Very well. Project Gotham Racing 3 was not some forgotten launch game that only gained appreciation years later. This wasn't a case of critics missing it or players ignoring it. At launch, people knew it was bloody good. More than that, they knew it was one of the strongest reasons to pay attention to the 360. And that context matters because launch titles can be judged differently. They're not just reviewed as games, they're kind of reviewed as proof of the new hardware and the console's promise, and proof that the future is going to look and feel different from what came before. And you know, in that sense, PGR 3 definitely did its job. Reviews regularly focused on the same core strengths, the visuals, the sense of speed, the cockpit camera, the sound design, the online features, and the fact that underneath all the next-gen shine, this was still a proper, good racing game. The praise wasn't just, haha, look how pretty it is, although, to be fair, there was a lot of that, and understandably so, but there was a lot more in depth. Now, going back to what I was saying about PGR 3 being known at the time, because of course it was a big series, getting a big launch on a big new console. But the thing is, nowadays, you know, the last entry was many, many years ago with Project Gotham Racing 4. Many people haven't even heard of this series. When I was recording split-screen footage for this game, I was playing with my partner's younger brother. He is 18, he has an Xbox, he loves Xbox, he loves racing games, and he had not heard of the Project Gotham Racing series, which made me feel quite old, but also broke my heart quite a lot. But because it's been so long since we've had a new entry, and let's face it, we probably never will get another entry because of Bizarre Creations no longer existing, a lot of younger players will just never know about this series. So if you have not played this series before and you're watching this video, I cannot tell you enough to go and play it. And if you're in the UK, I'm not sure what the prices are like outside of here, but you can pick up Project Gotham Racing 3 from like CEX or online for literally £1, £2. The same with Project Gotham Racing 4 as well. They're so cheap. Just buy them and play them because they're so fun. But anyway, let's have a look at the commercial side of things in terms of sale figures, because this is where things get a bit murkier. Because unlike some Microsoft-published franchises, Project Gotham Racing 3 doesn't have a clean, widely repeated worldwide sales figures that you can point to and say, that's the number. What we can say is that it sold well enough to matter, and of course it did get a sequel. It was a major 360 launch title, it was bundled in certain markets and console packages over time, it had strong visibility, it was one of the games people associated with the console, and in the UK, it received a Platinum Sales Award, which meant it had to have crossed at least 300,000 sales. That's not nothing. For a 360 exclusive racing game, that's a very strong result, but it's also important not to overstate it, because this isn't Halo or Gears of War. It was not the kind of game that single-handedly defined the 360 in the mainstream imagination, but it was a successful, respected, high-profile racing game. This was a game that had critical acclaim, a series with a loyal audience, and strong identity, but Microsoft was also building Forza Motorsport, and later the open-world racing space would be transformed by Horizon. The Xbox brand's racing identity was slowly shifting. The clean, technical score attack street racing of PGR started to look less central to Microsoft's long-term plans, so while PGR 3 was absolutely a success in its moment, it also existed in a slightly awkward commercial space. Too big to be niche, too stylish to be generic, but maybe not big enough to become untouchable, and that's the problem with being a cult favourite at platform holder scale. Fans love you, critics respect you, but the business still asks, what's next? And with PGR 3, the answer was kind of complicated. The game did exactly what it needed to do back in 2005. It helped sell the 360 as a premium connected, visually impressive machine. It gave early adopters a genuine showpiece, and it gave racing fans one of the strongest launch titles of the generation. And it proved that Bizarre Creations could take the PGR formula and make it feel spectacular on new hardware. But commercially, it didn't become the kind of unstoppable franchise pillar that would guarantee its future forever. It was successful, but definitely not invincible, and that's why the reception to this game is so interesting in hindsight. Because at the time, it looked like the series was in a great position. Strong reviews, award nominations, a visible place in the launch lineup, a clear identity, and devoted fanbase. But looking back now, you can also see the warning signs. a shorter career mode, narrower car progression, a reliance on online features for long-term value, a franchise that was critically loved but operating in the shadow of bigger Xbox brands. Basically, what I'm trying to say is this game was successful enough to be remembered but not powerful enough to be protected. Alright, so after all that, the launch hype, the supercars, the kudos, the online features and critical praise, where does the game stand today? Does it still hold up, and more importantly, is it really that good? Honestly, yes, but with a few important caveats. Because PGR3 is one of those games where you have to separate two things. What it was in 2005 and what it is now. In 2005, this was a statement game. It was one of the games that made the console feel genuinely new, the cars looked incredible, the cockpit view was impressive, you know, so on and so forth. At launch it did exactly what it needed to do, it made the console look fantastic. But does every part of PGR3 hold up equally well? No. The career mode can feel a bit short by some modern standards. The damage modelling in this game isn't exactly fantastic. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not like Forza is much better, but it's not great. The car list is exciting, but there aren't actually that many cars in the game. And compared to Project Gotham Racing 4, which we will look at in the future, that has much better weather, motorcycles, and a more varied feel. It's very much a launch game, but it is a polished and high quality one, but still a launch game nonetheless. So yes, Project Gotham Racing 3 really is that good. It is a very good game. Is it as good as 4? No, but we'll get into that another time. It is a very important game that should be cherished amongst the history of Xbox players, and if you haven't played a game from this franchise before, like I said earlier, please do. It's so good, and it's such a cheap franchise to get into. And so that takes us to the end of our look at Project Gotham Racing 3 for the Xbox 360. Let me know in the comments down below, do you like this game? Have you played it? Are you going to go and play it now? And if you have a favourite in the series, let me know. If you have a suggestion for a game you want to see a deep dive on, pop that in the comments down below. I am kind of just doing my own thing, but if you have any cool suggestions, I would like to hear them anyway. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to leave a like, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe and tap the bell for notifications to stay up to date with my future uploads. It's very much so appreciated. A big shout out to my Patreon subscribers, you guys are legendary, and all I really have left to say is thank you and goodbye.